Hello Story Store listeners, before we start this interesting story, please subscribe this channel, Story Store, and hit the bell icon. Thank you. Now here we go. Stood at the kitchen window, my hands wrapped around a mug Sarah had given me years ago for Mother's Day. Its delicate floral pattern now faded from use. The August heat pressed against the glass, blurring the edges of the driveway where Sarah and David were loading suitcases into the back of their van. The same van I'd helped them secure when David's startup hit a snag he'd brushed off with a practiced grin. Sarah paused, pushing a damp curl from her forehead, her face flushed from the effort. Her eyes, once bright with affection when they met mine, now slid past me, distant and unseeing. "You're not joining us for the family vacation," she said, her tone flat, as if she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. "David thinks it's best to keep it just us." Her words cut sharply, a quiet wound that burned deeper for its precision. Family vacation. The phrase twisted in my chest like a thorn. I'd already packed my bag, planned my outfits, mentally mapped out the trip I thought we'd share. How many times had I dropped everything to babysit their son Liam, so they could steal a weekend away? How many late-night calls had I answered, soothing Sarah's worries or helping David with a last-minute expense? I watched Sarah slam the van's rear door, her engagement ring glinting in the sunlight. She didn't glance back. David slid an arm around her, his posture protective, almost territorial, as if I were an outsider trespassing on their lives. The scent of my rose garden drifted through the open window, but it couldn't mask the sting of her dismissal. Not family enough, as they pulled out of the driveway. I pressed a hand to the glass, my reflection staring back, a woman with tired eyes and a trembling jaw. The van's taillights vanished around the corner, and the silence that followed draped over the house like a heavy curtain. My breath came in uneven bursts, each one carrying a realization that settled deep in my bones. Something inside me had shifted, not with anger, but with a cold, unyielding clarity. If they thought they could erase me so easily, they were mistaken. Weeks earlier, I'd stood in the bright open space of their new condo, sunlight streaming through bare windows. Things between us had already started to fray. Sarah's calls were shorter, her smiles tighter, and David's politeness had taken on a frosty edge. But I'd convinced myself the condo would mend things. I'd poured nearly all my savings into it, telling myself that giving them a stable home would bring us closer, that it would soften the growing distance. The place smelled of fresh varnish and possibility. We'd spent afternoons choosing paint colors, debating throw pillows, laughing over Liam's crayon scribbles on the walls. Sarah's smiles were faint but real, and for those fleeting moments, I felt like her mother again, not just a convenient helper. I clung to the hope that my sacrifice would rebuild what we'd lost, that love could be reclaimed if I gave enough. But the cracks were already there, subtle at first, like frost creeping across a window pane. David stopped bringing Liam over himself, always sending Sarah with an excuse, a client dinner, a sudden deadline, something urgent he couldn't miss. When he did appear, he hovered near the door, jingling his keys, his eyes darting to his phone as if my presence was a chore. One evening, as I carried a tray of cookies into Liam's room, I overheard them on the patio, their voices low and sharp. "She's too much, Sarah," David said, his tone clipped with frustration. "She's always around, always meddling." Sarah's reply came after a pause, soft but cutting. "I know. She means well, but it's like she's trying to live our lives for us." The words hit like a slap. I leaned against the wall, the tray heavy in my arms, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Too much. Always around. They saw me not as a mother or a support, but as an inconvenience, a shadow they couldn't shake. In the days that followed, I tried to dismiss it, telling myself David was stressed, Sarah was overwhelmed, but the signs kept piling up. Sarah stopped calling to chat about Liam's antics or her work frustrations. Her texts became curt, a single thanks or a thumbs up emoji. When I suggested a movie night, something we used to love, she hesitated, glancing at David before saying, "We're trying to focus on family time right now." Family time. The phrase echoed like a cruel taunt. I went home that night, the weight of it pressing down on me as I sat in the dark, the kettle's whistle the only sound breaking the silence. When Sarah finally voiced it outright, it felt like a blade twisting in an old scar. I'd stopped by their condo with a tray of lemon bars, still warm, the kind Sarah used to devour as a kid. I hoped we could share a quiet moment, maybe talk like we used to. But the air shifted the moment she opened the door. David stood behind her, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "Mom," Sarah began, her voice measured, "we need to talk about the vacation." She glanced at David, then back at me. "We think it's best if you don't come. David's parents are joining, and we want to keep it simple." David nodded, his tone brisk. "It's not personal, Ellen. It's just his parents are particular. They'd rather it be just us." Sarah twisted her ring, avoiding my gaze. "They already think our family's complicated," she murmured. "I don't want to make it harder for them." The room tilted. Complicated. Harder. My mind reeled, grasping at her words, each one a fresh bruise. I thought of every late night I'd spent with Liam, every check I'd written to cover their bills, every moment I'd set aside my own life to ease theirs. They wanted to hide me, to tuck me away like an embarrassing secret. The lemon bars sat forgotten on the counter, their sweetness turning bitter in the air. I looked at Sarah, searching for a trace of the daughter who once clung to me, but all I saw was a woman desperate to fit into a world that didn't include me. That night, alone at my kitchen table, the hum of the fridge filled the silence. The tray of bars sat untouched, their edges hardening. I thought of every sacrifice I'd made, my retirement savings drained for their wedding, the heirloom bracelet I'd sold to cover David's emergency, the countless evenings I'd skipped my gardening club to be their backup. I'd built my life around being their anchor, their safety net. But now I saw it clearly. I wasn't their anchor. I was a tool they no longer needed. A photo on the counter caught my eye: Sarah's college graduation. Her arm looped through mine, both of us beaming. I'd been so proud, so certain she'd always need me. Now, my hand trembled as I touched the frame, my thumb brushing over my own smiling face. I barely recognized that woman, so full of hope. Tears fell, hot and silent, and I let them. I was grieving not just their betrayal, but the version of myself I'd let fade away, the woman who'd given everything to be needed. In that quiet, aching moment, I realized I'd spent years offering my life to people who didn't value it. I closed my eyes, my breath steadying, and felt a spark ignite inside me. I wasn't ready to disappear. Not yet. The next morning, dawn painted the kitchen in soft golds. I sat with my tea, the mug's warmth grounding me as I replayed Sarah's words. But the sadness was shifting, hardening into something sharp. Resolve. I wasn't ready to be discarded like an old coat. I thought of every time I'd said yes when I should have said no, every dollar I'd given without question, every piece of myself I'd carved away to fit their needs. They wanted distance. I'd give them distance so clear it would cut like glass. I walked to my office, a small room lined with files and memories of a life I'd built before they consumed it. I pulled out the folder labeled condo documents, my fingers tracing the edges of the pages. My name stood alone on every line. No joint ownership, no trust, just me. The realization hit like a rush of cold water. The condo was mine. They'd called it theirs, lived in it like it was theirs, but legally, it belonged to me. A flicker of power stirred in my chest, the same strength that had carried me through my husband's death, through years of single motherhood, through rebuilding a life alone. I closed the folder with a quiet snap, my reflection in the window catching my eye. The woman staring back looked worn but alive, her eyes glinting with something fierce. I didn't have a full plan, but for the first time in years, I felt the pulse of my own strength returning. I wasn't waiting for their permission to exist anymore. By noon, my mind was clear, buzzing with purpose. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Thomas, a college friend turned lawyer, his voice still warm and steady despite the decades. "Ellen, it's been too long," he said, his tone bright. "What's this about?" I hesitated, then let the words spill out. "I need your help." The line went quiet, but it was the kind of silence that held space, not judgment. By afternoon, I was in his office, the walls lined with books and photos of his kids. The smell of leather and coffee grounded me as I handed him the condo papers. He scanned them, his eyes sharp, then looked up with a small smile. "Ellen, you're the sole owner. No transfers, no shared titles. It's all yours." A nervous laugh escaped me. Could I sell it? My voice was barely a whisper. He leaned forward, his gaze steady. "You could sell it tomorrow. They have no claim." He paused, softening. "Would that feel too harsh?" I swallowed, my throat tight. "Is it harsh to take back what's mine?" Thomas shook his head. "Harsh is letting people use you until you're empty. You're not being cruel, Ellen. You're choosing yourself." His words settled over me like a warm blanket. I left his office clutching the folder, the summer sun bright against my skin. For the first time, I didn't feel like shrinking. A seed of strength was taking root. Fragile but growing. The next day, I called Laura, my oldest friend, the one who'd seen me through every heartbreak and triumph. Her voice crackled with warmth. "Ellen, you're up early. Everything okay?" I poured out the story, the condo, Sarah's coldness, David's dismissals, my plan to sell. When I finished, I braced for her to urge caution, but instead, she laughed, fierce and bright. "It's about time, Ellen. You've given until you're hollow. They don't get to treat you like a doormat and keep the life you built." Tears pricked my eyes. What if I lose them for good? Her voice softened. "If they can't love you as you are, you're not losing them. You're losing their chains. You deserve better." I exhaled, a weight lifting. "Thank you, Laura. Always," she said. "I'm coming over. We'll make a plan." That afternoon, Laura arrived with a bag of muffins and a hug that nearly cracked my ribs. We spread the documents across the table, her eyes scanning every line. When she finished, she grinned. "So, when do we start the uprising?" I laughed, the sound startlingly free. "It's already begun." That morning, I'd contacted a real estate agent Laura recommended. A woman named Claire, who handled sensitive sales with discretion. She arrived later, walking through the condo with a calm efficiency that steadied my nerves. As she talked about staging and buyers, my fear gave way to a quiet thrill. My arthritis made heavy lifting impossible, but Claire assured me she'd handle everything: movers, photos, listings. I nodded, my fingers tapping the counter, each movement a pulse of newfound freedom. I looked around the condo, its walls once filled with hope, now a reminder of how I'd let myself fade. "Let's do it," I said, my voice firm. In that moment, I felt a surge of strength, the same fire that had carried me through Sarah's childhood, through widowhood, through every quiet sacrifice. I wasn't just reclaiming a condo, I was reclaiming me. 2 days later, the movers arrived, their efficiency almost clinical, as they packed Sarah and David's lives into boxes. I stood in the living room, watching each item disappear, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. Neighbors glanced from their windows, their curiosity palpable, but I met their stares with a calm nod. I owed no one an explanation. Around midday, David's sister Rachel stormed in, her face red with fury. "What are you doing?" she shouted, her voice bouncing off the bare walls. This is their home. You've lost it, Ellen. I turned to her, a strange calm settling over me. I'm cleaning house, I said evenly. Care for some tea? Peppermint's soothing. Her jaw dropped, her words stumbling. You're tearing them apart. You're heartless. I tilted my head. Heartless, or done being invisible. My voice was steady, cutting through her rage. They made their choice, Rachel. I'm making mine. She stared, her anger faltering, then spun and left, the door slamming behind her. I stood in the quiet, the echo of her exit like a period. At the end of a long sentence, I made a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the last box disappear. The sun was high, the day mine. Sarah's call came hours later, her name flashing on my phone like an accusation. I answered, my voice steady. Mom, she screamed. What have you done to our home? I took it back. I said simply, her voice broke, ragged with sobs. You're ruining everything. What about Liam? What about us? I closed my eyes, her pain slicing through me. You pushed me out first, Sarah. You made me a stranger in the life I built for you. You're selfish, she spat. You'll die alone. The words stung, but I felt a steel core inside me. Better alone than erased, I said softly. The line went silent, then dead. I set the phone down, tears falling, but beneath them, a quiet freedom bloomed. I'd chosen myself. That night, the house was still, every creak a reminder of the choice I'd made. I wrapped myself in a quilt Sarah had sewn for me years ago, its stitches a relic of a love I'd thought unbreakable. Doubt crept in. Had I gone too far? Would Liam grow up without me? But then I remembered Sarah's cold gaze, David's smug silence. I set the phone down, refusing to call her back. In the mirror, I studied my face lines etched by years of giving, eyes tired but alive. You did what you had to, I whispered. The words anchored me. I climbed into bed, the quilt heavy around me, and let sleep come, carrying the thought that I'd chosen wholeness over emptiness. The next morning, rain clouds hung low, but I dressed with purpose, a crisp blouse, a tailored skirt, a reminder of my own strength. I drove to Thomas's office, the sale documents in hand. As I parked, Rachel appeared, her face twisted with anger. You're destroying them, she shouted. You're humiliating Sarah. Thomas stepped out, his voice calm but firm. Rachel, leave now. She froze, then stormed off, her cries fading into the drizzle. Inside, Thomas and Claire walked me through the final papers. Each signature felt like a step toward freedom, the weight of their control lifting. When Claire handed me the check, I stared at it, my breath catching. I was no longer a footnote in their story. Outside, the rain kissed my face, a quiet cleansing. Back home, I typed a message to Sarah. The condo is sold. Your things are in storage. Enjoy your trip. I sent it, turned off my phone, and watched the sunset paint the sky in fierce hues. A knock came later, urgent and familiar. Sarah stood there, tear-streaked, collapsing to her knees. Mom, please, she sobbed. I didn't mean it. David pushed me. I'm sorry. I knelt, my hands on her shoulders, seeing the child she'd been. I've always loved you, I said, my voice steady. But love isn't a leash. You let me fade, Sarah. She clung to me, her sobs breaking the evening's quiet. I touched her hair one last time, then stood. When you're ready to see me as your mother, not your servant, I'll be here. Until then, I have to choose myself. I closed the door softly, my tears falling as I leaned against it. The pain was raw, but beneath it, a fierce strength pulsed. The next morning, David arrived, his voice sharp. You've overreacted, Ellen. You're tearing us apart for nothing? I met his gaze, unflinching. You broke this family, David. I just stopped letting you break me. He faltered, Sarah silent behind him. "You'll regret this," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I'll be free," I replied. They left, Sarah's eyes meeting mine one last time, a flicker of something regret, maybe, before they turned away. I closed the door, the silence no longer heavy but alive with possibility. Over the weeks that followed, I began rebuilding. I joined a painting class, my fingers clumsy but eager as they brushed color onto canvas. I reconnected with old friends, their laughter filling my evenings. The money from the sale sat in a new account, a promise of trips I'd take, dreams I'd chase. Some nights, I'd sit with the quilt, tracing its stitches, grieving the family I'd lost, but celebrating the woman I'd found. Sarah sent a letter one day, her handwriting shaky. She was seeing a therapist, questioning David's control, wanting to rebuild. I read it, tears falling, but didn't reply, not yet. I needed time to heal, to grow into the person I was becoming. The house no longer felt empty. It was mine, filled with my laughter, my colors, my life. As spring bloomed, I stood in my garden, roses thriving under my care. I was no longer a shadow, no longer a safety net. I was Ellen, whole and alive, writing a story that was finally mine. What did you think of Ellen's journey to reclaim her life? How did her story resonate with you? And where are you watching this from? Let us know your city or country in the comments below. If you were moved by this story, please subscribe to Story Store, like, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support keeps these stories alive. Thank you.